All right, welcome to the Sports Page Pundits. Today we are talking about the Final Four, an electric weekend coming up for college basketball, both men's and women's, which we will talk about today. How you doing today, Sooner?
All right, man. How are you? That was
Good.
a good weekend. Enjoyed the games and looking forward to the Final Four, man.
Yeah, absolutely. That last weekend was pretty electric with all the Elite Eight games, I should say, going on.
Yep.
Again, with both men's and women's. It's one of those things that it's March is a good sports month. We got to
Yep.
admit that. So,
Yeah. Most of the games
Keemer had
were very good, except UConn continues to just annihilate people. I mean, they have to be. I didn't, not a ton of research, but I'm going to guess since they went to 64, which was in the early 80s, they've got to have the biggest winning margin. There's no doubt. I mean, they're winning an average of over 30 points a game.
Yeah,
And
I could see that, and that's made a lot of headlines. And we'll talk about UConn here. UConn men's you're talking about, so we'll talk about them here in a little bit. But yeah, you're right. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
not even
they are.
close.
Yeah, it's not even. I mean, what did they went on like a 30-0 run for 10 against Tennessee? But
Yeah,
like the last 10 minutes and the first 10 minutes, I think Tennessee's hardly scored for like 15 minutes
right.
or something.
Yeah, it's
Crazy.
pretty close. It's. I'm sorry, it's not close any of these games.
No,
So
no, the
that's
rest of them
crazy. But
were some good games.
yeah. So anyway, we have Kulik, yours truly. We have Sooner throwing in here today. We may have a surprise appearance by Keemer.
Yeah,
Wasn't
yeah,
able to make it right at start, but we may still see him if he decides to throw a late but timely entrance into the
yeah.
conversation today.
Have
But
he'll have that appearance, like the Willis
yeah,
Reed running in is to save the day.
absolutely.
Everybody knows what I'm
Regardless,
talking about.
yeah. Regardless, we will truck on without Keemer today. So I am here fresh, kind of fresh here today. I had PRK eye surgery last Friday, and man, I could talk about that. I could fill up a whole couple of podcasts with that of what my going through on that. But that's now is not the time nor place to do that. But um, if you're wondering why I don't have the extra set of eyes, that would be exactly why. So we're trying to do that and go through the motions there. But I really want to start with the women's side, and that was a big weekend for the Elite Eight. But you know what? We have our Final Four. The overall national champion will be crowned on Sunday, April 7th. But before that,
Right.
we have some business to get to in the women's Final Four. So who's in? Who's in the women's Final Four? One of these four teams will host this year's national title. We have number one overall seed South Carolina, undefeated South
Undefeated.
Carolina.
Yep.
We have number one seed Iowa. We have number
Yep.
three seed North Carolina State Wolfpack. We've been talking a lot about them on the men's side, but the
Yep.
women's are doing great as well. So
Yep.
we also have Paige Beckers and the number three UConn. So
Yeah.
talking a little bit how they got there, or who's going to be matching up, right? So it'll be number one South Carolina versus number three North Carolina State. And they've got North Carolina State. If the women's are going to pull something off like the men's have been, they've
Yeah.
got a hill to climb versus South Carolina, huh, Sooner?
Yeah. The South Carolina has been just dominant force in the last several years, and they're just incredible again this year, undefeated, and that's going to be a tough. NC State's going to have to play the best game they've played all year to win that, but maybe them
Yeah,
and the men's are just destined to make this a special year. I don't know,
could be.
but it's going to be
But
tough.
Iowa,
They're really good.
if it is an Iowa South Carolina matchup, we'll talk about that as the next game. But with Iowa, but if Iowa and South Carolina were to match up, that could be a interesting matchup, seeing as I believe they played in the Final Four against each other last year.
Yeah, yeah.
Before
And,
Iowa inevitably lost to Angel Reese and the LSU Tigers. But yeah, North Carolina State, they've got a hill to climb versus South Carolina. But you know what? I believe in some Wolfpack magic here because the men's are doing it and the women's are as well. So we'll see how that goes. We'll talk a little bit about how each team got there, but then the next matchup is number 1 Iowa with Caitlin Clark versus number 3 UConn with Paige Beckers. So yeah, this I think will be a
quite a
great game
matchup.
as well. Sooner, you think
Yeah.
so?
Yeah, I mean, UConn is they're the best program in the last 25 years. There's no doubt, and they're right there as usual. They beat, I don't. Let's see, who they beat? They beat USC, correct? Isn't that who they beat?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was the number 1 seed.
yep, correct.
And
UConn
then it
beat
was
USC
NC
80 to
State beat
73.
Texas, I believe, and that game had a little bit of a craziness where the 3-point line. I don't know if you know, one end was a little bit different than the other. I don't know how in the
Yeah,
world that happens, but they said that, and both teams agreed just to have it. I don't know if it, how I don't know. It must probably just a few inches or something, but I don't even understand how that happens at an Elite Eight game. It just blows my mind. But yeah, that NC State knocked Texas out, and I don't. I always like seeing Texas lose.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and we'll
so
get to that in a minute here when we talk about how each team got there from the Elite Eight. But going back to the Iowa versus UConn match, what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, you have the two of the biggest stars, and I mean, Caitlin is an international star almost, and then the Yukon girl is really really good as well. And there's a
I think
little
you're
bit
talking
of
about Paige Beckers.
a little bit of a side thing where Caitlin Clark called out Gino a few weeks ago, saying that UConn didn't offer her, and then Gino had a little bit of kind of responded back. My theory is he knew that Iowa was only school that was probably going to get her, so he just didn't want to even worry about it. But I don't really understand why Caitlin brings it up, but she did. That's a little bit of a side thing. Um, and but I it seems like the Iowa is destined to keep it going. So I like Iowa, and I do think it's interesting. I don't know if you saw that Ice Cube's big three, the half court game is it's a rumor out there he's going to offer $5 million to play in the league this next year, which
Yeah, I saw that. I don't keep up with that big three very much, but is that supposed to be against male
oh yeah,
basketball players?
it's a half court game, and these are most of them are just kind of retired. Some of them are still not that
Yeah,
long retired NBA players, and there are some really big names in that. I mean, like
gotcha.
uh, you know, and I wouldn't blame her doing it for the money, but I have a feeling it
Yeah,
would not go real well because there's some
yeah,
pretty good players in that. And the thing is, if it was full court, yeah, because she'd probably be in better shape, but that doesn't matter because it's half court, and so
gotcha.
yeah. But
Yeah. Well,
I couldn't
anyway,
blame her for taking the 5 mil. Hey, I'd
that
probably
could be
do it.
interesting if it were to happen. So getting back to the women's bracket here. So how did each team get there? So we'll start with the Region Three, which in Portland, which was number 3 seed versus UConn versus number 1 seed USC, and this game it stayed close and it ended close. But this really in my opinion came down to included obviously star Paige Beckers. She has logged heavy minutes throughout the entire Huskies run,
Right.
and that's been needed really to get UConn this far. Because they've had some key injuries, so
Yeah.
she's really been able to take that Husky team kind of on her back a little bit, and she's shining out there. So
Yes, she is.
that was a good job knocking off a number 1 seed. So
Yeah, yeah. USC was very good this year. Very good.
yeah, you were. And then in Region 4 in Portland, we had number 3 seed North Carolina State versus again, another number one seed, Texas. They won that game 76-66, double-digit win. The Wolfpack star duo of Isaiah James, and Sanaya Rivers led the way, scoring or assisting on all but two of North Carolina's fast break points. So it was obviously a very fast-paced game, and that's if they could keep that up, I think that's kind of their key.
Yeah, the Wolfpack men and women are both just having a magical run, and who knows, they might keep it going.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, they're going to need to do that against South Carolina, because if they let South Carolina Gamecocks control that game, I don't know, but they're going to have to keep it fast paced, in my opinion.
Right.
In Region 1 in Albany, we had the number 1 seed South Carolina versus number 3 seed Oregon State, which knocked out my Lady Huskers. But this, they South Carolina, they almost blew a 22-point lead in the Sweet 16 at Indiana. They also almost blew a 14-point lead against Oregon State, but in the end, they still won by double digits. So, it didn't look as dominant, in my opinion, but there is a reason that they are undefeated. So,
I mean, Don Staley has got a great team, and NC State is going to they're going to have to play their best game. And even if they're playing their best, they, it may not be enough because they're so good.
Yeah. And then moving on to the highlight of the weekend for the women's bracket was Iowa Hawkeyes versus the LSU Tigers. And man, watching that game was just electrifying. We have Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese. We have the rematch, the behemoth rematch of last year's national title game. So that was huge, right? Yep. And both Angel Reese really started out that game, and the rest of the LSU Tigers, they really started out that game kind of controlling it from what it looked like to me.
Yeah, they did they did take a lead,
Yeah, and Caitlin Clark, for at least the first quarter and part of the second quarter, just felt off. They weren't making a whole bunch of action. They weren't. To me, I didn't see a whole lot of hustle in those first two quarters, but and it was all pretty much even at halftime. But then the third and fourth quarters of that game, Caitlin Clark did Caitlin Clark stuff, and
went off.
Ended with 41 points and a triple double.
Yeah, she was amazing.
Yeah, how else can you do that? I mean, not only was she, of course, dominant towards the end with her threes that really sealed the deal, but man, she was assisting. She was passing to a lot of her teammates. And I've heard a lot this week about the haters out there that say, "Oh, Caitlin Clark's a ball hog." No, she's not. She's a ball hog. She wouldn't be getting a triple double.
No. If she would be getting her 35 points and just a few assists and a few rebounds, but she does. I mean, she's getting assists, rebounds, steals, and points. She does everything excellent. And she takes a lot of shots, but she's really good, so you want her to take a lot of shots. So,
right. Yeah, totally. I mean, she. So many times I heard in that game, another shot from the logo, another shot from the logo. She sinks them. She sinks it. Like she's a great athlete, just overall athlete. She can get it done, and you know what? She did get it done. We towards the end, before Angel Reese fouled out of the game, Iowa was in control of it. But that just kind of set the said the last couple minutes there that now I don't think there's going to be a miracle comeback at all.
Right.
So, but yeah. Anyway, so the great games, and we got a pair of great games this weekend for the women. So both Final Four showdowns are scheduled for this Friday. They will be played at the Rocket Mortgage Field House, which is home of NBA's Cleveland Cavaliers, which will be the site of this year's women's Final Four.
Yeah, and that Iowa UConn is quite a matchup. You got two great players, but you have kind of the blue blood beast from the last 25 years taking on, I mean, just kind of the upstart because of the great player that homegrown Caitlin Clark, because Iowa I don't think has not been consistently that great till she got, I mean, they had some decent team, but she really got them, and she's that local homegrown. And then you against the mighty UConn that has got what Gino had, 8 or 9, 10 national championships in the last 20 years or something. I mean, it's an interesting matchup. I think Clark probably does find a way to win. I think she's just so focused. The only thing she's not ever got is the national title, and that gets her one more step. And I think she does get to the final.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great basketball to watch. So, the schedule for women's Final Four this Friday: number 1 South Carolina versus number 3 North Carolina State will be the first game, 7 p.m. Eastern time. That will be followed up by number 1 Iowa versus number 3 UConn at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Both Final Four contests will air on ESPN. And you can watch those games. I read that you can stream them on ESPN.com and the ESPN app as well. And then, of course, whoever wins those matchups will then meet for the national championship on Sunday, April 7th.
So the games are on the ESPN Plus as well, is what you're saying?
It said the ESPN.com and ESPN app. So I don't know. I know that having ESPN Plus, I do know that there's some different stuff between ESPN Plus and like signing up for ESPN. It's all.
I have Plus, but sometimes you don't get the games always that are on ESPN. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. So.
Exactly.
It would make sense if they should. I mean, there's so many people that have it. That'd be silly for them not to.
True. Yeah, I agree. So I'm not too clear about the ESPN Plus. So I'm not going to comment on that one because I'm not sure about that one. But should be good matchups. And I will be watching that Friday. So along with a lot of other people. I read something interesting today that the average resale ticket price for the women's Final Four is $2,300 for a ticket.
Holy.
Woo! We're starting to get into
start putting those games in the domes. Well, I don't know this. I mean, the Caitlin Clark thing that's not always going to happen where you have just some amazing. I think she's really held, but
hey, it might. There's a lot more interest in whether that's to think Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese or some of these other players. I think women's college basketball is getting more.
It's getting bigger.
Yeah,
but they'll be gone after this year, so we'll see. Like
in a bigger audience,
yeah.
But you've got other stars that will come through. So, Angel Reese, she might come back. I don't think she's declared.
I think she announced that she's leaving, I believe.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Yeah.
Last I heard, she had not yet announced if she's declaring for the WNBA draft or not. But okay. So no Angel Reese, but we'll have others out there. So
yeah.
All right. Well, what do you say? Want to move on to the men's?
Sounds good. Oh, I guess we have to. Your picks. I've got Iowa. I have South Carolina, and so who do you have?
Oh yeah. So picks for Final Four. My heart wants to pick North Carolina State, but I can't pick them over South Carolina. I just can't. So I'm gonna have Iowa who beats UConn. I think that'll be a closer game. In my opinion, a high scoring game. But then I think it'll be South Carolina versus Iowa.
And I think even though South Carolina seems like the pick, I don't know. It just seems like she's destined. I think Iowa wins the national championship.
Yeah, South Carolina has proved, especially in their last elite game, they're not untouchable.
Yeah.
They've had a couple problems holding on to double digit leads and sometimes 20+ point leads. So they get those leads, of course, but can they get that against Iowa? Right?
No, I don't know because Caitlin's just about better than anything they face. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, we'll talk about that probably next week, leading up to
yeah,
that national title game. So, all right. What about men's there, Sooner? What do you think
yeah.
about men's?
Those some great games. NC State is amazing. People forget that in the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament, Virginia was up 3, and had Virginia made a free throw with 5 seconds to go, NC State would have never moved on. They would have never made the tournament, and they would never be in the Final Four.
Yeah.
But they did, and they lost their last regular season game, but now they've won 9 straight, which they had to win them all. They would not continue winning the 5
Yeah.
ACC and now 4. You've got in that matchup, it's rare you see 2 true big men, but you're going to have Burns, who's a big body that can bounce, with Edney, and so that'll be fun to see that because you just don't see that very often. And both have really good guards. I think if Burns can stay out of foul trouble, they've got a great shot. He cannot get those silly fouls. Um, but if he can do that, then I think they have a really good shot. I think. And so, what do you think about that game?
Yeah. Well, so in a obviously, so the Final Four is set. In a shocking Elite Eight upset, the 11th seeded North
Yep.
Carolina State.
Yep.
They really, what they did is they powered through to beat their longtime rivals and
Yep.
ACC foes, Duke. So,
Yep.
and they beat them. I mean, again, they beat
Pretty
them by double
solid.
digits. So,
Yeah. Every time Duke would kind of seem like they took control, NC State would hang in there, and then the last 10 minutes they never could catch up. And Duke's star Filipowski, he didn't do very much at all. They really missed him. Um,
yeah,
and which I was concerned because Duke was still ahead at halftime without him doing much, but he still didn't do much second half. So, and Burns he's just a good player, and I don't know, they're just a team that's pretty on an amazing run.
they are.
Um,
And you know what? With that win, they paved their way to their first Final Four appearance since 1983.
yep,
That's
that's the
that's
year
they
they
haven't been
won.
there since I've been alive.
That's the year they won. Where at the buzzer, you've seen the play, and they'll show it, I'm sure, several times. Where at the buzzer it was tied, and Lorenzo Charles dunked it in, and they beat the great Houston Cougars teams with Elijah and Drexler, and
Yeah,
and then they were like an 8 or 9 seed that year, and they had to win the ACC tournament to make it. So this team has those in the '83 vibes. See Jim
yeah,
Belvano running around. I know up in heaven he's looking down and loving this. Um, but they got to beat a really good Purdue team, and Purdue, I have to say, that was a really, really
yeah,
a good win. Um, by
yeah,
them, they got gone blank. Tennessee
yeah.
played. Who did Purdue beat? I'm going blank.
Yeah, well, before we get there, I actually want to throw an interesting fact about
Yep.
North Carolina State, and actually not North Carolina State, but the 11th seed in general. So, an 11th seed is the lowest seed to ever make the Final Four, tying the record with LSU in 1986, George Mason 2006, and VCU 2011. I think we remember that one.
Yep. That was a shock of
Loyola,
smarts.
yep.
Yeah.
Loyola Chicago 2018 and UCLA in 2021. So that's some good company right
That
there.
and
And
that
those
the
teams.
VCU team, they were in the first. They were one of the Final Four. The 68 group. So they had to win an extra game to get to that. They
Mm-hmm.
did. They were in the '68 year, and they were one of the last 4 in. Um, but and it's also was a strange fact. It was the very first time ever a 4-11 had ever played in the NCAA tournament since it's gone to 64. That's never
Yeah,
happened, which is crazy.
yeah, it is a little bit. So yeah, but yeah, so they Duke, just they pulled away from Duke. About 7 minutes left in the game, and they just they controlled it for the rest of the game. So, like you were starting to say, the Wolfpack will face the number 1 seed Purdue Boilermakers on Saturday at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. So, the Boilermakers, man, they really surprised me. I have to admit, I did not think they were going to get this far to the Final Four. I didn't even have them getting to or I did have them going to the Elite Eight, I think, but I did not have them going to the Final Four. So
right. I had Tennessee winning that game. So
yeah, I didn't have Tennessee winning, but I believe I had who did I have? I had I believe Creighton.
Gonzaga or Creighton?
No, I had Gonzaga beating Purdue. That's who I had. Yeah, but that didn't work out. We'll not talk about that poor choosing. But anyway, so the Purdue Boilermakers, they took on Tennessee Volunteers, and Tennessee, they've got a good team. They've got a very defensive oriented team, in my opinion, from what I've seen them play in this tournament at least.
Rick Barnes, he's good defensive coach.
Yeah. So, but I tell you what, not only will they have to have defense, but they're going to have, if they had wanted to beat Purdue, they would have had to put up more points, to be honest, because you're not really going to stop Zach Edey from scoring on the board, right? Too often.
Yeah, and the Tennessee is interesting. The guard that their big scorer, who interesting, he's like a 2-year starter at Northern Colorado, and then he transferred to Tennessee, and he's the SEC Player of the Year. He's an All-American, and he's projected as like a top 10 pick. Where that's just incredible. The guy was at Northern Colorado.
Because you're of course talking about Dalton Knecht.
Yes.
Yep.
Knecht. And I mean, he was really a great player this year. I don't know how so many schools missed on him but he definitely the portal was a good thing for him and for Tennessee. And the Tennessee, they've not. I still don't think they've ever made.
Yeah. Well, Dalton Knecht, he's I believe he's a Colorado boy.
Yeah.
So I'll take some pride in knowing that. I kind of still wish he was playing for the UNC Bears and taking them to the tournament, but
yeah, he wouldn't have had as good a team. But Tennessee would not have been near as good. I mean, he's by far their best player. And he's projected. He kind of reminds me he kind of might be kind of a JJ Redick type player. Very, really big time shooter. And Redick, he was a good pro for 12, 15 years, and I could see him Knecht being that he just kind of reminds me of JJ Redick.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then let's see, we've got the next game. We've got number 1 seed UConn Huskies versus 4th seed Alabama Crimson Tide. Roll Tide basketball. We're talking about Roll Tide basketball now. Isn't that something?
Their first Final Four, and they it looked, that game was very back and forth, and they were able to do it. And the interesting thing is most people felt like they had a better team 2 years ago or last year, and all those teams didn't make it, and they thought this was the least best team, and they were able to get to the Final Four. But they have got a tall task beating UConn, because UConn is, wow, they are playing really well.
Let's talk about that a little bit. We started on Alabama, so they had an 89-82 victory over the Clemson Tigers, and Clemson Tigers, they've surprised me throughout the tournament, and they're not a bad team. They're a very good team.
No, they had a good team. They were very solid. But I think UConn it's another level, and they are just playing with such good
Yeah.
confidence. Alabama will have to play a almost perfect game to pull that one off, because it kind of reminds me of the Florida teams of like 06, 07. The 06 was kind of a surprise Final Four team that won the national title, but then the
Mhm.
next year they all came back with Horford and Joaquin Noah and Corey Brewer, and they were just
Sure.
elite and dominant, and they rolled through it. And that's kind of because UConn was kind of an unexpected, but but then a lot of the guys came back, and now they just look so good. That's kind of who they remind me of. I don't think they have
Yeah.
quite as good of players as Florida, but the style, the way they kind of unexpectedly won, and then they came in as the top three ranked, and they rolled the whole season because
Sure.
they're very
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I will tell you though, Alabama, they have big guys down low, and you know what? Those big guys can shoot as well from the
yep
perimeter. So
yep
I I don't think it'll be I don't think it'll be a cakewalk for the Yukon Huskies. I am kind of intrigued by this Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team, and I'm kind of
yep
pulling for them over Yukon, but I don't know if it'll happen. But then Yukon. So Yukon, they ended up beating the Fighting Illini of Illinois.
yep.
They beat them 77-52.
Yeah, that
So,
was. Whew.
and here's the thing: the Illinois Fighting Illini, they have some big guys that can
Yeah,
shoot
oh
from
yeah.
the perimeter, and they just got walked on by the
Yeah.
Huskies of
I
Yukon.
think between first half and second half, I think UConn won like a 30-0 run, and
Yeah,
that was it. I don't even. That was it. But UConn's done that stuff. They have built out leads, can get about 8 or 10 or 12-point lead at half, and then by 10 minutes to go, they're up by 20 to 25.
yeah.
They're the two biggest times. The last 6 minutes and the first 6 minutes are so huge, and they are just dominating in that area and blowing teams out. And Alabama,
Yeah.
they're going to have to play really well to even hang in there, I think.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, Terrence Shannon for Illinois, he's their star, right? And he's a good
Yeah.
player. I I just he didn't have an answer for UConn.
No, no.
Did not have an answer for him. And it's just one of those things that I think they were just outmatched. And that could very well be Alabama this coming this Saturday. So
Yeah,
we'll see. Hopefully it's a little bit better of a game than that.
yeah.
And hopefully,
And that is one thing when you bring up that if UConn is in a close game, they haven't had to do that in the tournament. That might be,
yeah,
they may not. Who knows how they react? They haven't had to really worry about the last 10 minutes of a game. So if Bama can get into that last 10 minutes, keep it at it. If it's under 10, then maybe they can pull it off because UConn will have to play better instead
yeah,
of just coasting. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so we've got our final four. What's your predictions, Sooner?
well, I will love to see NC State win it all. I don't. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Cinderella ends. Purdue reminds me a little bit of Virginia. In 2018, they were the one seed that lost to the 16, and then the next year they won the national championship. Purdue kind of reminds me of that type of team. They were refocused, so I think they get past NC State. I just I can't see UConn being beat.
So what's your
I
prediction?
really don't want it to be. I really don't want this to happen, but I think UConn will win it again and beat Purdue to win the national championship.
Oh, okay. So we're going on a national championship. Okay. So obviously then you have UConn beating Alabama,
Hmm.
And then what was your pick for
Purdue.
again?
I'd love to see NC State win, but I think, like I said, I think Purdue is a focus. Remember, they lost in the as a 1 seed last year in the first round, just like
Yeah.
Virginia did in 2018, and then in the next year, Virginia wins the national title. So Purdue has had that run. And so I think they beat NC State, but I don't think they'll have enough to beat UConn. But they'll still have had a great season compared to last year. So
Okay. All right. Well, there you heard it. There you heard it from Sooner Thrawn. So my picks are, I'll go with the easiest pick first. I am pulling for the Alabama Crimson Tide, but I don't think they will do it. I will pick UConn to beat the Crimson Tide. However, I don't think it's going to be a 20+ point victory.
right. Yeah.
I think it can definitely stay closer. Those big guys I was talking about for Alabama, they're gonna definitely have to come to play, and they're gonna have to they're really gonna have to play some defense. They're gonna have to obviously be key on their shots. But yeah, so hopefully that'll be a good game though. Now, Purdue versus North Carolina State. I've been doubting Purdue the whole tournament. I'm not doubting them with this pick, but I think the North Carolina State Wolfpack are going to beat Purdue. If the games were reversed and you had North Carolina State playing UConn, I would not choose North Carolina State. But I think I am going to choose them against North Carolina State. North Carolina State against Purdue, because I do think that they can match up well. As far as size, it's hard to match up with Zach Edey well, but I do think that DJ can do it. So I think he's got the momentum, and he's got the player's edge, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's not as tall as Zach Edey, but he's got some force on him. So I do like that matchup actually between him and Zach Edey.
It'd be fun to see two big guys. Traditional big guys. You don't see that too often, so that'll be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will be interested to see that, but I will choose North Carolina State to beat Purdue, and I will choose UConn to beat the Crimson Tide of Alabama. So I will keep my pick for national champion for the next one. But in the meantime, I think we're winding down. So, Sooner, you want to give a shout out?
I'll let you go. What do you got?
I've got a shout out. Baseball, Major League Baseball has started. I love my Denver teams, but I got to give a shout out to the Colorado Rockies, who are not disappointing me in how they started the season. It's been terrible, and I'm going to go see them play when they're opening up home this weekend, and I am going to go see them play a little bit. I hope for a win, but Colorado Rockies, O'Dowd, the Monforts, ownership of the Colorado Rockies, something's got to give. And it's just not given right now. I mean, just thinking of what the Rockies have done in the past few years just blows my mind. They get rid of Arenado, and by the way, paid the St. Louis Cardinals to get rid of Arenado. But then they give Chris Bryant a huge contract, who is doing a fraction of what Arenado was doing for the Rockies. So anyway, it blows my mind. And for that reason alone, I have to give my shout out to the Colorado Rockies.
Well, I thought, because I just heard something yesterday that my Cowboys, they're all in. Remember, Jerry Jones said, we're all in. And at this moment in free agency, The Atlanta Falcons have spent $240 million, and that's understandable. They're a team that's very much probably needs that. But then the dynasty of the Chiefs, we're talking the last 6 years, 3 Super Bowl wins and 6 NFC or AFC title team. They spent $200 million.
Yeah.
And then the rival Philly was about 150. But, Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, they're all in. They've spent a whopping 11 million and they're so far in free agency. And the next closest team would be the Chargers, who's 45 million.
Wow.
So I'm just they're just a marketing firm that sponsors a football team, if you ask me.
Well, that's kind of the Colorado Rockies ownership is they're a marketing team who owns a team that happens to play baseball, Major League Baseball. But
the
they
Rockies
really
are not the Cowboys. I mean, we're talking about
but it's the same thing. They just they want to
yeah.
make the money. They're okay making the money, and whatever results happen.
Yeah.
So. But anyway, all right. Well, good shout out, good conversation today. Look forward to a weekend of basketball. And I think we will probably talk about that. In the meantime, we will be back next week to reveal the NCAA men's and women's national title games. So in the meantime, as Keemer would say, we love you, but we got to go.
Peace.
Thanks, Sooner. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
You too, buddy.